Hey friends, this is Eunice again, and I'm jumping on with Shin-Yu. I hope that you saw the first part of our interview, and if you have not, I encourage you to go back and just listen to her powerful testimony. So I just want to start by sharing this scripture because today we're talking about just following the God dreams that He places in our hearts. And Shin Yu has made some incredible leaps of faith with her husband. And I have just been so encouraged by their story. So I'm going to start in Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. Now, today, why I wanted to share this scripture is, as you heard in Shinyu's testimony, she has overcome some massive trauma in her life. And I love this last part about the oaks of righteousness for the display of his splendor. And that's where I feel like Shinyu's testimony is that she is moving into a place of just sharing her testimony more freely with others. And she made this massive step of faith, and she is really going to be sharing for the display of others of just what the Lord has done in her life. And I love that. So, Shinyu is a pharmacist, and she did a massive shift in her career path in this past year. And so I just want to ask you, what prompted you to change your career path?
Well, I mean, it was you, Eunice. Well, you were a part of it. You are a part of it. You came into our lives at a time where I was contemplating and making some big decisions of our life in a very prayerful way. But so for all who are listening, yes, I am. I am a clinical pharmacist. I've been in school. I was in school for, oh my gosh, it was almost a decade with all of my training and my studying. So
Wow.
you would think that, man, you've been in school for this long and you're set, right? That's what I'm going to do for the rest of. I mean, many of us think that. Well, that's what I'm going to do for the rest
Right.
of my life. My trajectory set. I went to school for all that, or else, what is it good for, right?
Right.
Um, so I know, I know. And I certainly felt that way. I certainly felt that way. I was like, I have a plan. I'm going to be in this role, and then I'm going to seek out this type of a role, and I'm going to retire at this age, right? Everything was set. But the reality is that's not what life threw at me, and that's not the path that that my husband and I have been on. So I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and both of whom have very special medical needs, I think is probably the best way to put it. My daughter, if her diagnosis was any later, would not be here with us. She requires a device to survive. She
Wow.
also has, another condition that's considered stable, but we monitor it every single year because it could change. My
Wow.
son, yeah, and we really prayed about having a second kid. So that's why there's a age difference in my kids, is because we really need that time to think, Lord, will you give us another kid? Can we parent another kid? And so when my son came along, we're like, okay, he's going to be different. He's going to be easier. Eunice, that's what Shannon and I thought. It's going to be different. It's going to be easier. And it just wasn't.
Wow.
It just wasn't.
Yeah.
And so he has his own medical challenges. And I was working full time, and in a lot of different clinical and also leadership roles. And my husband is a full time missionary, but we both were working full time. And the reality was, our marriage is suffering. We were
Mhm.
not, you know, you look at each other and you're like, okay, what, when have we really spent quality time together? It's almost like they're a partner, but not really a husband or wife, if that makes sense. Like we're just here to get things done, to survive.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I almost think that we loved each other, but we didn't like each other. There's a difference.
Mhm.
There's a difference.
Because you guys were
And
just kind of like survival
oh
mode.
yeah,
Like,
oh,
yeah,
no
for
doubt
sure.
about it. We weren't thriving. We were just
Mhm.
surviving.
Yeah.
And and our kids just needed so much, like when we came
Yeah.
home, it was like hustle and bustling. There was no quality to life. It was just getting things done. And I could I could feel God saying something has got to go. Something has to change. And throughout this period of time, while my son was, when he was an infant, I was already starting to burn out. And, it was the height of the pandemic,
Mm.
and I was feeling incredibly burnt out. I was grateful for my job, and I think people were aware of the compensation for a pharmacist. I'm not going to lie, it was wonderful to be able to provide for my family in a way,
Yeah.
in that way, but I wasn't really enjoying life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
was really just desiring for something different. And for all of our listeners out there, I really am probably a writer or poet, wrapped in a pharmacy degree. Like, so
Wow.
I
Okay.
I never really wanted to be in healthcare. I
Uh-huh.
actually really enjoy counseling people and helping people. And I love to tell stories. I love to write, and I had no outlet to do that. There's no margin of life. There's no outlet, and I was really unhappy. But
Yeah.
for me, I was like, how can God ask me to lay down this wonderful degree that I spent years trying to get? It was frustrating. It was frustrating, but it came down to a point where I needed to be a better wife. I needed to be a better mom. And my husband and I prayed for oh gosh, a long, long time. And
Mhm.
we also sought help. We talked to you and Chris too as we processed our decision.
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to say it, but yes, we did it. And
Yeah.
I do I still keep my letter of resignation on my desk, because I think to lay down your job
Mhm.
is really, really hard, because it's such a big part of our identity, isn't it? When we've worked for so long, we've trained for so long,
Mhm.
and you have to think, what am I now without that job?
Mm.
Am I still good? Am I still do I still have something wonderful to contribute? Who am I? So a bit, but I don't have any regrets. I don't. But it has been hard. It has been fulfilling, but it has not been easy.
Mhm. Okay. So you were just living life as a pharmacist, climbing the ranks there, and then the Lord invited you to write. And so that's something that I love is that like although it was hard, it is something you are very passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
that's pretty awesome. So what has been the most fulfilling part of the journey and what has been the most challenging part in that?
Being the primary home parent, uh, has has taught me that life takes on a different rhythm.
Mhm.
So think about like having like decades of working this, 8 to 5, 9 to 6 job, right? And then now you're home, and you're like, what? How do I organize my time? What do I do? What do I prioritize? It's like figuring out a new routine, a new rhythm has been challenging, more challenging than I care to admit.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
if I wanted to, I could just sit there
Uh-huh.
and watch my murder mystery shows, you know,
Uh-huh.
not get anything done. But Shanna and I have been learning a new rhythm and a new routine. I think the most fulfilling part has been seeing my relationship with my husband and my children restored. Let me explain what I mean by that. Is we are laughing more together. We are
Oh.
spending more quality time together. I my daughters and my son's speech have just exploded because I'm there for, you know, drop off, I'm there for pick up. I'm not having to worry about what am I having to plan for work the next day, or
Mm.
you know, the other things in my mind. My mind is cleared. My focus is my family. And I'm able to also just plan activities and have the energy to go out to the park, to the museum, to do, and I'm talking with my kids. I think God calls us to be the primary disciples of our kids.
Right.
And I think being able to do that has been so fulfilling, because seeing my kids ask me questions, their wonderment, their joy, my kids are completely different than when I was working full time. And I'm really grateful that that my husband and I have the ability for me to be the home parent.
Mhm.
And the fact is, I can now cook better. I can I can now cook better. And being able to serve my family in that way has been so good for our physical health. Like, so my son has a really bad gut, you know, and I think being able to do more home cooking has provided some, you know, some more physical healing in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do before.
Well, that's
So
amazing. But
yeah.
among those challenges, I just want to ask you, just knowing you guys, like, you guys have sacrificed. You've cut back significantly. You've even made a location change. So could you speak into a little of that? Because that's just been fascinating to watch.
You're right. I forgot about our move. I totally forgot. Yes, we made a move cross country. Um, so as I alluded to this before earlier on in our conversation, that I think being a pharmacist affords you a certain um, like certain salary, right? And I think it gives you the ability to do different things than if you didn't have it. And I think oftentimes, now I don't know how you feel about this, Eunice, but as as people, we have this desire to I want everything, I want it now, and I want it perfectly. And I would love to be able to live in a place that perhaps we enjoyed more geographically.
Mhm.
Perhaps I would like to purchase things that give me more joy, right?
Mhm.
But that's just not possible, right?
Yeah.
That's not possible. And so my husband, my California loving husband, um, made the sacrifice for us to move cross country to St. Louis, Missouri. But we made the move, one, yes, because it was a financial decision, but more importantly, it was a place where we have a very strong community
Mhm.
that would help us raise our kids alongside us, and also give us the bandwidth and space and time to focus on our marriage. You know, people being able to help watch the kids so my husband and I can go take a walk or share a meal together, so that we can start, this sounds terrible, but start dating again and
Yeah.
start
No, that's
reacclimating
awesome.
ourselves, and to discover that we still like each other. There's still love.
Oh, that's
Yes,
awesome.
I still love him. So yes, we made a lot of changes to support our new priority, and our new priority is being home, me being home, being present for the kids, being present for the family, and that, and putting that as a priority meant moving. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow. So that move, how was that? Was it insane,
Oh
or was
man,
it like, you know, everything was so smooth?
I can laugh about it now, but I wasn't laughing then. Okay,
Okay.
so um, the move has been hard. I, California is very different than Missouri. You know,
Mhm.
it's a different culture in a lot of ways. And when we arrived, it was triple digit heat. Humidity was really bad. And I think my husband might have said to me, "Oh man, why? Why?" And there was a lot of pieces that needed to happen to make the move possible this past summer. And whether it's people taking care of housing on both sides and the
Uh-huh.
timing of the housing
Oh yeah.
opportunity,
Uh-huh.
it needed to align. So we pray. We're like, God, if this is in your plan for us, show us favor. Show us your favor.
Yeah.
And God provided by
Amen.
yes. Oh, so in so many ways. I have this in my journal. Like he provided by providing like taking care of housing and letting the housing go on one end, and then providing housing within like our budget on the other end in the right time, by the way, in the
Yeah.
right time. And then giving us a moving company that would allow us flexibility in, storage. Also, again, the right resources and money for it to happen. Like
Wow.
there
Praise
was
God.
God,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And the best part is language is very important to my husband and I. God's really given us a love of wanting to impart our mother tongue to
Uh-huh.
our kids. And the fact that our kids are placed at, schools that will allow them to continue speaking in Mandarin and to have
Yeah.
a spot for them was also just really God, we felt like it was God's provision for the
Mm.
move.
Wow.
My what I've learned is when you take a bold step, you trust God, he does provide, Eunice. He really
Mm.
does provide.
That's awesome. So is that okay? I wanted to ask you, what has God been teaching you through it? So provision is one. Any other things the Lord's been teaching you in this huge, I mean, because you guys took a huge leap of faith, really. Financially, moving states, so many things, new schools for your kids.
I I have learned that I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but I am.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes God whispers things to us, and then sometimes we don't acknowledge or listen. Sometimes God tells us, and then God will just yell at us. And what I've really learned is I when we are in tune to hear what God has for us, it really does require that big leap of faith. And I would encourage all of us to give in our lives to give God that space to tell us those things
Mm.
and those changes that we might not, I think we need to make space for God in our lives, is what I'm saying.
That's
And
good.
when we're really busy, we don't give God space to tell us things,
Mm.
Eunice.
Yeah.
But when we give God our hearts, our time to really listen,
Uh-huh.
he has a huge gift for us. He really does. And maybe it will not unfold in the way that you think it will. It will be in his timing, but it will be a gift and it will be good. That's what
Yeah.
I've learned.
That's so
And
good.
I am capable of non-pharmacy skill sets and that I am still loved and valued for my non-pharmacy skill sets. So that's
Huh.
been really good for me.
That's awesome. That's good. So, what are some pieces of advice or words of encouragement you could pass on to someone who is thinking of shifting in their career to pursue a God dream in their heart?
Man, for this is going to sound incredibly corny or repetitive, but in this entire time, the most important thing has been just prayer
Mm.
and seeking the wisdom of strong Christian women and their support. I think oftentimes, sometimes we hear something, but we don't know, like, was that me? Was that God? Right. But when we seek out the wisdom and guidance from trusted Christian women,
Mm.
oftentimes that's the step or assurance that we need to take an action step based on what we're hearing. And
Hmm.
I would say that you're going to feel scared. It's going to be scary. You're like, how is this going to happen? Like, you guys, it won't be planned out. Not every step is going to be planned out. But when you take that step one, God's going to make that step two clear to you. Maybe not right away, but He will.
Yeah.
Does
I
that make
love
sense?
that. Yeah, I love that. No, I think that's awesome. So then that's a good point to share. So you actually wrote a book. So it's not like you've been like at home watching your murder mystery movies. You wrote a book in this season of transition, which I was just amazed by. And so could you share more about your book and what you're doing now? Because earlier you said you started a little business. So I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Thanks, Eunice. Yes, book writing. Boy, you think it just writes one draft and it's done? No, we're still knee deep in the draft. But yes, I am writing a book about the strong women in my life who've helped to reshape and reparent me in my adulthood.
Wow.
It's just a story of God's provision that I'm just so lucky that God's given specific women in my life to help me heal and find my own voice um, as a wife and as a mom. And each of these women came from different upbringings, different geographic backgrounds, different ethnicities, but yet they've had an impact on my life and the life of my kids. And I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for their influence and guidance in my life. And how I met them is a very unique story, but I will leave that for the book. For the book.
Yeah.
Um, and even though I'm not actively practicing pharmacy, I am really passionate about helping other women and parents to navigate the healthcare system. I think oftentimes when we don't have that medical knowledge, we don't know what questions to ask when there's a new diagnosis or a hard diagnosis,
Hmm.
or parents who are just so overwhelmed with all their medications, or do they feel like they're being heard right in the treatment process. So
Hmm.
part of what I do with my company called Light and Compass is that, one, I want to be a light and a voice for other families, and I, I'm a, I want to be a compass to provide direction. So using my medical knowledge and how I've advocated for services for my kids, I feel like God's given me that expertise, and I want to be able to share it and be that voice for other families.
Oh, I love that. I love so things I love about you. One is just how I feel like um it's so wise that you have sought out mentorship in your life, and that it's really like people that you observe that you're like, oh, like they have a godly family. Like you're not just taking advice from random people. You're really
No.
taking advice
Mm-mm.
from people that you want to grow and learn and glean from. And I love that. So I'm excited to read your book that's coming out in the spring, right? Hopefully. And
Mm-hmm.
then
Yes,
and
yes.
then the consulting company, if anyone feels led, I really encourage you to reach out to Shin-Yu, and I will include her contact information for you in the show notes, because when she's talking about her kids having medical challenges, they are not little. Like we have had to reschedule this interview multiple times, but sadly it's because often it's like her kids are sick or one's in the ER, and it's like an emergent thing that she's had to take care of. And so I think it's amazing how you're using just the gifts that the Lord's given you, the knowledge of your pharmacy degree, to advocate for others and really be a blessing to others, because that is tremendous. You guys have walked through some massive things with your kids' health challenges. So I think that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks, Eunice. And I guess for those that may not have heard part one, so yes, my kids have both have very special medical needs. And man, I should have mentioned that. That's also just a big reason why I want to enjoy my time with them and to fully embrace being their mom. So another main reason why I had left my job.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I love seeing just the fruit of your choices. Like, so here's like probably about a year out from when we first met, or maybe a year and a half.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. All right.
Yeah. And now this is part of why. So my last podcast, I talked about just remembering. the story of God in our own lives, the testimonies, because even I'm looking at your life in the past year, year and a half since we met online, and what the Lord has done, even what you're saying about the fruit that you see in your kids, the fruit that you're seeing in your relationship with your husband, just finding each other again, dating each other again, loving and liking each other again. I love that because I think that's the thing, that's the story of marriage, even
Oh
is
yeah.
like our marriages, we go through these ups and downs, these ebbs and flows. And it's like, man, but it's a lifetime, it's a commitment of a lifetime. And so are you going to live in that survival mode the rest of your life? I mean, some people choose to,
Yeah, that's true.
but like, are we going to
That's true.
like have fun in life and like, walk through this journey the way I feel like the Lord intends for us to like love each other, thrive and grow deeper in our relationship and continue liking each other. I think that's amazing. So thank you for sharing all that. Do you have any last words of encouragement that you want to share with people?
Well, I think something just encouraged, something just occurred to me that, from based on what you said, Eunice, I think marriage or any relationships are hard, right? And there's always going to be ups and downs, but can we laugh together? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and my husband and I were, he loves Costco. We were at a Costco recently, and we just broke out laughing when we looked at each other. It's an inside joke. But my point is, when we were laughing together, I realized, wow, it's been a while since he and I like spontaneously laughed together. But we did it because we made deliberate choices, and God led us to this place of making these choices of prioritizing our marriage and our family. And
Mm,
yes, and yes, making those things a priority and making decisions based on new priorities does mean that certain things take a pause. It's not gone forever, right?
mm-hmm,
But it's taking a pause. And that's okay.
mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
just my encouragement.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story because it is remarkable and it's encouraged Chris and I even so much. Like so many of our coaching calls afterwards, we're like, wow, that's awesome. like like just the things that you've been doing, the steps of faith that you've made have just been so encouraging to watch. And we just love seeing couples and families thriving, honestly. That's why Chris and I love doing what we're doing with the journey home. We just love seeing people, you know, thrive wherever the Lord has planted them. So um, thank you all for listening. And I really do hope that you will reach out to Shin-Yu if you have questions about her consulting business. And when her book comes out, I'll definitely post it on my social media so that you can grab that book. So thank
Thanks,
you
Eunice.
all for listening. And Shin-Yu, seriously, thank you for sharing your story today. I hope you all have an amazing week. Bye bye.